My name is Zara, and I was born into a world where my voice was never meant to be heard. In our tight-knit Somali community in Minneapolis, girls like me existed in the spaces between whispers and silence. We were taught to lower our eyes, speak only when spoken to, and prepare for the day we would become someone else's responsibility. I was 13 when I first understood what that meant. It was a Tuesday in October when my older cousin Amina didn't come to school. She'd been there Monday, sitting next to me in biology class, complaining about the upcoming test on cellular respiration. By Wednesday, the whispers started. By Friday, my aunt was posting photos on Facebook of a beautiful wedding ceremony in traditional dress. Amina was 15. Her husband was 38. "She's so lucky," my mother said, scrolling through the photos on her phone. "Dr. Hassan is very successful. He'll take good care of her." I stared at the images, Amina in elaborate gold jewelry and flowing fabrics, her eyes rimmed with kohl but strangely empty. In one photo, she stood next to a man who looked older than my father, his hand possessively on her shoulder. "Where will she live?" I asked quietly. "Toronto," my mother replied without looking up. "He has a practice there. She'll have a beautiful life." That night, I tried calling Amina's number. It was disconnected. Over the next months, I began to notice things I'd previously overlooked. How my cousin Farah, who used to love art class, suddenly stopped drawing. How Khadija, the smartest girl in our grade, was pulled from school the day after she got her period. How my Aunt Sarah would sometimes stare off into space during family gatherings, her eyes holding stories she'd never tell. The pattern was always the same. A girl would reach a certain age, usually between 13 and 16, and then she would disappear. Sometimes there would be a ceremony, sometimes just a quiet announcement that she'd gone to visit family in Somalia, Canada, or the UK. They never came back to school. They rarely came back at all. I started keeping a journal, writing down names and dates. Not because I planned to do anything with the information, but because someone needed to remember. Someone needed to witness. Amina, October 15th, married to Dr. Hassan, moved to Toronto. Khadija, November 22nd, engaged to uncle's business partner, moved to London. Farah, December 8th, wedding ceremony, husband's age unknown, moved to Minneapolis suburb. The list grew longer each month. It was during a school research project about human rights that I stumbled upon information that changed everything. I was in the downtown library, looking for sources about women's rights movements, when I found a book tucked between legal texts. When Culture Becomes Crime, a guide to understanding forced marriage. My hands trembled as I opened it. Page after page described scenarios that sounded exactly like what I'd been witnessing. The book had statistics, legal definitions, and most importantly, stories from survivors who had escaped. I learned that what was happening in my community had a name: forced marriage. I learned that it was illegal in Minnesota, regardless of religious or cultural justifications. I learned that girls as young as 12 were being trafficked across state and national borders under the guise of arranged marriages. Most importantly, I learned that there were people who would help. Hidden in the back of the book was a small card that had been left by someone, a hotline number, and a website address. I memorized both before checking the book out under my student ID. The website led me to an underground network of women who had escaped forced marriages. They called themselves the Phoenix Project, women who had risen from the ashes of their former lives. Their forum was hidden behind password protection, disguised as a recipe-sharing site. For weeks, I lurked in the shadows, reading story after story. Women who had fled in the middle of the night. Girls who had sought help from teachers, social workers, and police. Some had succeeded in building new lives. Others had been caught and brought back, facing even stricter control. But what struck me most were the posts from girls still trapped, still planning, still hoping. They shared coded messages about escape routes, safe contacts, and legal resources. They had developed an entire language of survival hidden in plain sight. Finally, I gathered the courage to create my own account, Minneapolis Seeker. My first post was simple: I see what's happening to the girls in my community. I want to help. What can I do? The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within hours, I had dozens of messages from women across the country. They shared resources, strategies, and most importantly, hope. A woman named Fatima, who had escaped a forced marriage in Detroit 5 years earlier, became my mentor. She taught me how to create information packets, how to identify girls at risk, and how to plant seeds of knowledge without putting anyone in immediate danger. Creating the information network required careful planning. We couldn't simply hand out pamphlets. That would be too obvious and dangerous. Instead, we developed a system of hiding information in places where curious girls might find it. I started with the school library, tucking small cards with helpline numbers inside books about women's history. In the bathroom stalls, I left tiny notes written in Somali, Arabic, and English, disguised as graffiti. I even created fake social media accounts to share coded messages about study groups and after-school activities that were actually information about legal rights and escape resources. The Phoenix Project provided templates for what they called survival guides, documents that looked like homework assignments, but contained crucial information about protective orders, emergency shelters, and legal aid. I printed dozens of copies, distributing them carefully among girls I suspected might need them. My closest ally became Yasmin, a girl 2 years younger whose sister had gone to visit family in Somalia the previous summer and never returned. Yasmin was terrified she would be next, especially as she approached her 14th birthday. "My mom keeps talking about how I'm becoming a woman," she whispered to me one day after school. "She says I need to start preparing for my responsibilities." I slipped her one of the survival guides, disguised as notes for our shared history class. "Study this carefully," I said. "There might be a test." The call came at 2 a.m. on a school night. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is Yasmin. Help me. They're taking me tomorrow." My heart pounded as I crept out of bed, typing back, "Where are you?" "Locked in my room. They have my passport. The imam is coming in the morning to do the nikah ceremony. Please." I had prepared for this moment, but the reality was terrifying. Following the protocols I'd learned from the Phoenix Project, I contacted the emergency hotline and sent Yasmin detailed instructions about what to do when morning came. "Tell them you're having severe stomach pain," I texted. "Insist on going to the hospital. Once you're there, tell the nurse you're being forced into marriage. Use those exact words. They are mandatory reporters." The next morning, I waited anxiously by my phone. At 11 a.m., Yasmin texted, "I'm safe. CPS is here. They're filing an emergency protective order." The plan had worked, but the consequences were swift and severe. Within hours, Yasmin's family was spreading the story that she had been corrupted by outside influences and was mentally unstable. They claimed she had made up the marriage arrangement and was being manipulated by people who wanted to destroy their family. My phone rang that evening. It was Yasmin's older brother. "We know you helped her," he said, his voice cold. "We know you've been filling girls' heads with lies about our families. This isn't over." The retaliation began immediately. My parents received calls from community leaders expressing concern about my behavior and Western influence. At the mosque, whispers followed me wherever I went. Some families forbade their daughters from speaking to me. But the most painful betrayal came from within my own family. My favorite aunt, Zara, who had always been like a second mother to me, sat me down for what she called a serious conversation. "Zara," she said, her voice heavy with disappointment, "what you did to Yasmin's family was wrong. You don't understand the pain you've caused." "What about the pain they were going to cause her?" I shot back. "She's 14, Aunt Zara, 14. "That's old enough in our culture," she replied firmly. "These traditions have kept our families strong for generations. Who are you to decide they're wrong?" The conversation escalated until I found myself screaming something I'd never said out loud. "Then, why do you look so sad all the time? Why do you flinch when Uncle Abdi raises his voice? Why did you try to run away when you were 17? The The silence that followed was deafening. My aunt's face went pale, and I realized I had crossed a line I couldn't uncross. "How did you?" she began, then stopped herself. "You don't know what you're talking about." But I did know. I had been watching, listening, remembering, and I had seen the pain behind her eyes that she thought she had hidden so well. Word of Yasmin's escape spread quickly through the underground network. The Phoenix Project connected me with an investigative journalist named Zara, who had been documenting forced marriage cases across the Midwest. "I've been tracking this for 3 years," she told me during our first encrypted video call. "Minneapolis has one of the highest rates of forced marriage in the country, but most cases never make it to court. The girls disappear, and no one asks questions." Zara had compiled a database of missing girls, teenagers who had stopped attending school, stopped posting on social media, stopped existing in their former lives. The numbers were staggering. Over 200 girls in the Minneapolis area alone had vanished from public records over the past 5 years. "But that's just the ones we can track," she explained. "For every girl we can identify, there are probably 3 others who were never enrolled in school or never had a social media presence." She wanted to write a major exposé, but she needed more sources. She needed girls who were willing to speak on the record, families who would admit what was happening, and officials who would acknowledge the scope of the problem. "I can't promise it will be safe," she warned me. "Once this story breaks, there will be backlash. Are you prepared for that?" I thought about Yasmin, safe in a foster home but cut off from her family forever. I thought about Amina, somewhere in Toronto, living a life she never chose. I thought about all the other girls whose names I had written in my journal. "Yes," I said, "I'm ready." The article was published on a Tuesday morning in March. The headline read, "The Disappeared: How Forced Marriage Thrives in America's Immigrant Communities." Zara had done her job well. The piece was extensively researched, sensitively written, and devastating in its implications. It included interviews with survivors, legal experts, and community leaders who were brave enough to speak out against the practice. My quote appeared near the end of the article, identified only as a teenage activist working to help at-risk girls in Minneapolis. "These girls aren't disappearing by accident. They're being erased systematically, and everyone knows it's happening. The question is, what are we going to do about it?" The response was immediate and explosive. Within hours, the article had been shared thousands of times on social media. News outlets across the country picked up the story. Disappeared girls began trending on Twitter. But with visibility came danger. My identity wouldn't stay secret for long in such a small community, and I knew the consequences would be severe. 3 days after the article was published, I came home from school to find my parents waiting in the living room with 2 community elders and our imam. "Sit down, Zara," my father said, his voice colder than I had ever heard it. I remained standing. "We know what you've been doing," one of the elders said. "Spreading lies about our families, corrupting young girls with Western ideas, bringing shame to our entire community." "I've been telling the truth," I replied, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "The truth," my mother's voice was sharp with anger. "The truth is that you've been brainwashed by people who hate our culture, who want to destroy our families." The imam leaned forward. "My daughter, these traditions you're fighting against, they're not oppression. They're protection. In our culture, a girl who is married young is safe, provided for, honored. What you're encouraging is fitna, chaos, and corruption." "Safe," I couldn't help but laugh bitterly. "Like Amina is safe, like Khadija is safe. Where are they now? Who's protecting them?" "They are living good lives with their husbands," my father said firmly. "They are fulfilling their purpose as women." "What about my purpose?" I asked. "What if I want to go to college? What if I want to choose my own life?" The silence that followed was answer enough. Finally, one of the elders spoke. "You have 2 choices, Zara. You can repent, publicly apologize for the harm you've caused, and submit to your family's guidance. Or what? Or you can leave this house and never come back. You can see what life is like without your family, without your community, without anyone who truly cares about you. I looked at my parents, hoping to see some sign of love, some indication that they would choose me over their reputation. But my mother's face was stone, and my father wouldn't meet my eyes. "I need time to think," I said. "You have until tomorrow morning," my father replied. "Decide what matters more to you, your family or your rebellion." That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, knowing it might be the last time I slept in this room. I thought about what I would lose if I left. My family, my community, the only life I had ever known. I thought about what I would lose if I stayed. My voice, my freedom, my ability to help other girls. At 3 a.m., my phone buzzed with a text from Sarah Chen. "Saw the social media posts. Are you okay? If you need help, call this number." I scrolled through Facebook and Instagram, seeing post after post from community members condemning the lies in the article, calling for the journalist to be sued, demanding that whoever had helped her be held accountable. But there were other posts too. Private messages from girls I barely knew, thanking me for speaking out. A comment from a woman named Layla saying she had escaped a forced marriage in Ohio and was now a nurse. A message from someone in Canada who said she had read the article and realized she wasn't alone. At 5 a.m., I made my choice. I packed a single backpack with essentials, wrote a letter to my parents explaining my decision, and climbed out my bedroom window just as I had seen in movies. But this wasn't a movie, this was my life, and I was choosing to live it on my own terms. The transition house Sarah had arranged for me was a modest apartment building in St. Paul, run by an organization that specialized in helping young women from immigrant communities. My caseworker, a soft-spoken woman named Maria, had worked with dozens of girls in similar situations. "The first few months are the hardest," she warned me during our initial meeting. "You'll question your decision 100 times. You'll miss your family desperately, even knowing they would have controlled your life. That's normal." She was right. The loneliness was overwhelming. I had given up everything familiar for a future I couldn't even imagine. Some days, I thought about calling my parents, apologizing, agreeing to whatever they wanted. But then I would remember Yasmin, now thriving in her foster home and planning to attend college. I would think about the messages I continued to receive from girls who had found the courage to seek help because of the article. I would remember that I had proven something important. It was possible to say no. The Phoenix Project helped me enroll in a new school, where I threw myself into my studies with renewed purpose. I joined the debate team, started a human rights club, and began volunteering at the organization that had helped me. Most importantly, I continued the work I had started. The network of information sharing had grown beyond Minneapolis, connecting girls across the Midwest who were facing similar situations. We had developed more sophisticated methods of communication, better resources for emergency situations, and a growing list of safe houses and legal contacts. 6 months after I left home, Sarah Chen called with news that both thrilled and terrified me. "The FBI has opened an investigation," she said. "They're looking into human trafficking charges related to the transportation of minors across state lines for the purpose of forced marriage." The investigation had been triggered by the article and the subsequent reports from girls who had come forward. Yasmin had agreed to testify, and several other survivors had contacted federal authorities with their stories. "This is bigger than any of us imagined," Sarah continued. "They're finding evidence of organized networks that move girls between cities and countries, marriage brokers who arrange matches for fees, documents that show girls as young as 12 being transported for marriage ceremonies." The legal proceedings would take years, but for the first time, the full scope of what was happening was being officially acknowledged and investigated. 2 weeks later, I received a letter that I almost didn't open, recognizing my mother's handwriting on the envelope. "Zara," it began, "your father has forbidden me from writing to you, but I cannot stop thinking about what you said about Aunt Sarah. You were right. She did try to run away when she was 17. I helped her pack her bags, but I also talked her out of leaving, convinced her that family was more important than her fears. I have regretted that decision every day since. I don't understand the choices you've made, and I may never forgive you for the shame you've brought to our family. But I want you to know that I'm proud of your courage, even if I can never say so out loud. Be safe, my daughter. Be happy, be free. Your mother. I cried for hours after reading that letter, tears of grief for the relationship we could never have, but also tears of relief that somewhere, buried beneath years of tradition and fear, my mother still loved me. The day I testified before the Congressional Subcommittee on Human Trafficking was the most terrifying and empowering day of my life. I sat at a long table in a room filled with lawmakers, advocates, and journalists, telling the story of how forced marriage had shaped my community for generations. These crimes hide in plain sight, I said, my voice growing stronger as I spoke. They're disguised as cultural tradition, protected by religious freedom, and ignored by authorities who don't want to be seen as discriminatory. But culture cannot be used to justify human trafficking. Religion cannot be used to excuse child abuse. And tradition cannot be used to steal a girl's right to choose her own life. The questions that followed were sometimes skeptical, sometimes sympathetic. Some lawmakers asked about the balance between cultural sensitivity and child protection. Others wanted to know what could be done to prevent these marriages without criminalizing entire communities. The solution isn't to attack culture or religion, I explained. It's to separate tradition from trafficking, to distinguish between consensual arranged marriages and forced ones, and to make sure that every girl knows she has the right to say no. After my testimony, a reporter asked me if I regretted the choices I had made, if I ever wished I had stayed with my family and accepted their plans for my life. I regret the pain I've caused people I love, I answered honestly. I regret that speaking the truth has been so destructive, but I don't regret saving my own life, and I don't regret helping other girls save theirs. 3 years have passed since I climbed out of my bedroom window and into an uncertain future. The FBI investigation resulted in 17 arrests and the rescue of 43 girls from forced marriage situations. New legislation has been passed requiring better training for teachers, social workers, and law enforcement officials to recognize signs of forced marriage. The Phoenix Project has grown into a national organization with safe houses in 12 states and a network of survivors who mentor girls still trying to escape. I've been accepted to college with a full scholarship, planning to study law and human rights. Most importantly, the silence has been broken. Girls in immigrant communities across the country now know they have options, that forced marriage is illegal regardless of cultural or religious justifications, and that there are people who will help them if they choose to seek freedom. I still receive letters from girls who are planning their own escapes, asking for advice, sharing their fears and hopes. Each letter reminds me why I made the choices I did, why the loss of my family was worth the lives we've been able to save. Not all of their stories have happy endings. Some girls are caught before they can escape. Some are moved to countries where they have no legal protections. Some choose to stay, either from fear or genuine belief in the traditions they were raised with. But every girl who learns she has a choice represents a victory. Every conversation about consent and legal rights plants a seed that might grow into freedom. Every law that's passed, every investigation that's opened, every survivor who speaks out makes it harder for these crimes to continue hiding in the shadows. If you're reading this and recognizing your own story and mine, know this: you are not alone. What's happening to you has a name, and it's illegal. You have rights that no one can take away, no matter what they tell you about culture or religion or family honor. You have the right to finish your education. You have the right to choose when and whom you marry. You have the right to say no, to fight back, to seek help. The path to freedom isn't easy. You may lose your family, your community, everything you've ever known. But you will gain something invaluable: your own life, lived on your own terms. There are people who will help you. There are safe places you can go. There are laws that will protect you. Most importantly, there are other girls who have walked this path before you and survived. We are your sisters in the truest sense, bound not by blood, but by the courage to choose freedom over fear. Your voice matters, your life matters, your choices matter. And somewhere, in a future you can't yet imagine, there's a girl who will be saved because you were brave enough to speak up, to seek help, to prove that escape is possible. The chain of silence has been broken. Now it's your turn to decide. Will you stay trapped in someone else's plan for your life, or will you write your own story? The choice is yours. It has always been yours. You are not alone.